So our series here right now is called Behind the Stone. And I wanted to get a little bit more theological in nature with you guys. So behind the stone for me really meant what had to happen before Jesus could go to the cross, die for my sins, be risen again, and then not be physically behind that stone anymore. What had to happen? You know, the Old Testament is full of scriptures that talk about a prophecy. It talks about a Messiah. So a lot of stuff had to happen for Jesus to fulfill that prophecy. And that's what I wanted to dive into this morning. And that is where God took me down kind of a weird path. And it's kind of a hot take for you this morning. I don't believe that Judas was a bad guy. It ended just about as bad as it could for Judas. I agree with you on that. I mean, he betrayed Jesus. He took some hush-hush bribe money. He killed himself. Ultimately, probably went to hell. Sure. Could not get any worse. But this whole Bible is filled with stories like that. Filled with people just like Judas. I mean, Moses murdered a guy. And we consider him the hero who brought the people out of slavery. David slept with a married woman and then sent her husband off to die so that way he could keep having an affair with a married woman and he would feel better about it because she was no longer married. Saul hunted down Christians, right? Samson disobeyed his parents, but then after he disobeyed his parents, he ate and drank as much and whatever he wanted. He chased after women his whole life, and then ultimately Samson also killed himself. And yet we look at Samson as a biblical hero of this book. You know, Judas did the exact same actions of everything I just named, and all of these guys are heroes. And we despise Judas. What if Judas repented? Do you guys think that God would have forgiven him? Even after Judas betrayed Jesus, kissed him on the cheek, got him arrested, do you think Jesus would have forgiven him? I agree, because that's what God does. God wants the best for each and every one of you. And yet, I'm still thinking, like, how awesome of a story would it have been? The man who literally betrays the Son of God comes back, repents. God wraps his arms around him, hugs him, changes his name, gives him back a new path, and he's like the greatest hero that the Bible would ever see. How empowering would that story have been? I'm going to preach out of the Bible, and I really came down to three things for you this morning, and that is the heart, the intention, and the response. What was Judas's heart? What was his intention? And then how did he respond? Judas had a heart to put Jesus on a throne. Judas's desire was to see Jesus as king. He really did. We look at Judas as he's the betrayer, and he betrayed Jesus because he wanted Jesus' power, and he wanted the throne instead of Jesus. But the Bible doesn't say that. Let's look at it in John 6:14. The people realized that God was at work and among them in what Jesus had just done. Okay, I want to take a quick pause, catch you up. At that time, he had 5,000 people walking around with him. 5,000 people who truly believed that Jesus was who he said he was. So he gets up, he preaches over 5,000 people, and then afterwards, there's this guy named Philip. Philip comes up to Jesus, and he's like, hey, Jesus, there's 5,000 people. You think we should feed them? Jesus looks at Philip, and he's like, okay, yeah, go feed them. And Philip's like, I can't feed them. That would take half a year's salary to feed these 5,000 people one single meal. And Jesus is like, what's money? I'm God. Bring me what you have. Philip goes, he gets 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish, and Jesus miraculously feeds every single one of them, all 5,000 of them, until they were content. And that is what this scripture is referencing as to what Jesus had just done. So, John 6:14, the people realized that God was at work among them in what Jesus had just done. They said, this is the prophet for sure. And that prophet is right here in Galilee. Jesus saw that in their enthusiasm, they were about to grab him and make him king. So Jesus, slipped off and went back up the mountain to be by himself. So all of the people that he was ministering to, the 5,000, his disciples, Judas, if you will, they all believed in the prophecy. They believed what was written as the prophecy. They believed that Jesus was who he said he was. And they believed that Jesus was the Messiah and the fulfillment of all of the scriptures that they've been studying their whole lives. You know what the problem was? They were trying to put him on a literal throne. They tried to make Jesus what they wanted Jesus to be. They believed that he was going to be an earthly king who would lead the Jews politically back into their rightful place next to God as God's chosen people. They were trying to tell Jesus when to become king, even if it meant literally grabbing him and putting him there by force, grabbing Jesus, the Son of God, and putting him on a throne by force. That was their plan. The real issue was Judas was impatient. It's really a warning, right? It's really a warning about putting our own timelines, our own visions, our own desires of what we want in place of God, in place of God's plan for your life. You know, Judas, like very, very many of us, was saying, Jesus, I know who you are. Jesus, I hang out with you. Jesus, I go to church every Sunday, and I'm even in a small group. Hey, Jesus, I got a cross tattooed on my arm. That's pretty cool. Hey, Jesus, the back of my car, it's a bumper sticker that says, He is greater than I. What's better than that, Jesus? Jesus, I believe that you are the fulfillment of the scriptures. And that's what I'm saying out loud. But Jesus, my plan's better than yours. Judas showed that in the way he acted. So what are your actions saying? Leaving the others, that's Judas, leaving the others, Judas conferred with the high priests and the temple guards. Who did Judas go to? The high priests. Who should Judas have gone to? Why did he go to the high priest? Because he knew that the high priests were going to agree with him. He knew if he went to Jesus, no matter what the truth was, Jesus was going to tell him the truth. So where did he go? He went to the one place where he knew people were going to agree with the things that he was saying. Journey, stop going to people that just agree with you. If everyone in your life agrees with everything you say, those are not your friends. Stop going to people that just agree with you and start being more careful with the people that you let speak in your life. Leaving the others, Judas conferred with the high priests and the temple guards about how he might betray Jesus to them. They couldn't believe their good luck and agreed to pay him well. He gave them his word and started looking for a way to betray Jesus out of the sight of the crowd. If he truly thought what he was doing good, why wouldn't he want the crowd to see it? Why was he doing it in secret? If you really think what you're doing is good, then why are you doing it in the shadow? Luke was written in Greek. The word that we're translating here as betray in Greek actually means give over. So Judas wasn't looking for a way to backstab Jesus. He was looking for a way to give over Jesus. Judas believed in the prophecies that were written in the scriptures. He believed that Jesus was the Messiah sent to fulfill the scriptures. But the problem was he didn't believe in the throne that Jesus actually wanted to be on. He believed in the throne that Judas wanted Jesus to be on. So he decided, okay, I'm going to go to the high priest, people that agree with me, people that agree with the words that I'm saying that were first in my head, and now I'm going to these because one of two things is going to happen. The first is these priests are going to agree. Jesus is the Messiah. Best case scenario, right? Worst case scenario, or so Judas thought, spoiler. Worst case scenario, these priests aren't going to want to step out of power. They're very used to the high power that they hold. So when I go and Jesus steps in, they're going to go, no one's taking my power away. They're going to get really aggressive with Jesus, but then Jesus is God, or so he's been saying. So he's going to send down an angel army, and he's taking that throne by force. That did not happen, did it? Well, that wasn't part of the plan. Jesus faced the joke of a trial. Well, that wasn't part of the plan. Jesus got beaten before their eyes, hung on a cross, and died. That was not part of the plan. Judas's intention may have been to put Jesus on a throne, but even the best of intentions can still hurt people. And now he's standing there. And now this is my own imagination going, and he's looking around, and he sees Jesus' mom looking up at the cross as her son just died. She's just crying. Then he looks over here, and he sees all of his best friends, all of the disciples, all the ones closest to Jesus. They're hanging their heads. They're crying, and now they're being hunted. So they've got to run. They've got to hide. And he looks over here, and he sees Mary Magdalene laying on the ground, and she's crying because Jesus saved her. And now she had to watch him endure the worst punishment ever. And now Judas is standing there, and his heart's breaking as he's looking at all of this because he knows he caused it. And he's got all of these things weighing on him that God says you were never made to bear. I believe that God would have still looked at Judas, hugged him, comforted him, gave him a new name, gave him a new purpose, gave him a new life. Peter had just denied Jesus 3 times. The Bible says spiritually, Peter did the exact same thing that Judas did. Peter turned his back on God, and yet we remember Peter as the hero. And no matter how bad you think you are, no matter how bad you mess up, you can never be as bad as they felt in that moment. But then Peter, standing there with his despair, with his depression, with his guilt, because he had just disowned Jesus. He had just disowned his mentor, his teacher, and his God. And he had all of that guilt. And he turned and he ran to God. And he said, God, forgive me. I'm sorry. And you know what God said to him? Get up. It's forgotten, Peter. And from that moment on, Peter created the church, pastored a church, led people to Jesus. It ends so badly for Judas because do you know who Judas turned to? He goes back to the priests. He goes back to the same people that caused all of this. Back to the same people that are causing his depression, and he goes back to them. That's what Judas did. He turned his back on Jesus, and he ran to the priests. He turned his back on the one guy that could have comforted him, the one guy that could have changed his whole life, changed this whole story. And instead, he goes back and puts all of his faith back in the priests, puts all of his faith back in the world, that they're going to make him feel better. This is why Judas is in hell. It's not because Judas sinned. We've all sinned. It's not because Judas hung himself. Do you know why Judas is in hell? Because he disowned Jesus. Because he never truly accepted the gift that Jesus was offering him of salvation. And it followed him all the way to the tree where he hung himself. You know, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. You're Judas. I'm Judas. Peter was Judas. Difference is we don't have to end like Judas. We can end like Peter.